What we celebrate at Christmas is not the birth of a particularly sweet and harmless baby, nor even the welcome possibility of having a few extra drinks in the middle of winter. We celebrate a set of discoveries about God and about humanity. Or, as Christians have regularly said, not so much discoveries as revelations. We are shown something about God. That the God we believe in is not a God who has to be lured down from heaven by being very, very polite to him or behaving extra well. We are dealing with a God who can't help himself overflowing, boiling over into the world that he has made. A God who cannot give less than the life that is the divine life. We're dealing, in other words, with a God who doesn't have to be persuaded to be interested in us. And that's quite a good start. And one way of keeping a Christian Christmas might be to look at what relics there are in our minds and hearts of an approach to God which still believes that God is essentially rather bored with us, rather removed from us, and always in need of being kept sweet. However long you've been a Christian, or however long you've been looking wistfully at Christianity from outside, that's something which keeps obstinately coming back. I speak as a sinner to sinners, you understand. That's deeply etched in our minds. The mythology of a God who somehow has to be persuaded to be on our side. You might as well try to persuade a waterfall to be wet. But there's more. The way in which that overflow impacts upon us is not by force or command. It's by a solidarity, an identification so deep, so serious and total, that we can only say when we see Jesus, we see God, and we see, therefore, a God who values our humanity beyond all imagining. So the second question about how we keep a Christian Christmas is to ask some awkward questions about how we value human lives, how we value the lives immediately around us, how we value the lives that impact upon us in negative, dangerous and difficult ways, how we value the lives that appear not to be especially significant or effective or efficient. If we take seriously what these carols say, we ought to be looking with speechless amazement at every human face. God thought this face was worth everything. God thought this person was worth everything. God thought, God thinks, that there is no gift or risk too great to bring full life and joy to this person. And God thought and thinks that this person can reflect something of the massive generosity that is God's own act and nature. It's possibly the hardest thing in the Christian faith to accept or understand. That radical sense that wherever we turn, we see a humanity God has believed to be supremely worthwhile. Of course, day by day, we make our little judgments and we take our sides. We think unthinkingly that such and such a life is obviously less worthwhile than another. We think the lives of our enemies are less worthwhile than the lives of our friends. And while there are monumentally difficult decisions to make in our world about the use of force, about defense and war and the like, the one thing the Christian has to be sure of is that wherever we turn, the human life we see is a life as valuable as ours. And if our actions diminish or destroy it, that is nothing for triumph and all for tragedy. You could say that God's attitude to human nature is a bit like that of some master craftsman restoring an ancient and wonderful musical instrument. Looking at the old and damaged instrument, the craftsman might say, well, I could repair this with a bit of synthetic material, with a bit of composite here and a bit of glue there. But it's not actually going to perform what it's capable of performing unless I work very hard with the grain of the wood and replace what's worn out with the same material. Because that material is good, and it's that material which is capable of singing. So God approaches our humanity. God doesn't say, with a bit of luck, I might find some moral plastic substitute that will fill in the gaps. God says humanity itself needs to be inhabited and transfigured from within. So how do we look at that humanity, even in its distorted, violent, threatening forms? Even when we feel driven to those difficult decisions which now we face in the defense of our society. And then the third question that comes about a Christian Christmas has to do with that last and hardest set of ideas. Yes, God's life overflows into our humanity. Yes, God inhabits our humanity fully in the life of Jesus. And then, yes, that inhabiting takes the form of an immense risk-taking and letting go, an immense attention to the reality of the other, a defenselessness that we ought to find deeply frightening. A Christian Christmas is a time when we ought to be overwhelmed, both with the surprise of God's nearness, the glory of the humanity that God restores, and at the same time alarmed, properly alarmed, by the radical nature of the claim made. If we are to be given second birth, if as children of earth we are to be raised, there is a letting go, a letting down of our defenses against one another and against God, which is the path to fullness of humanity. Not very welcome and anything but easy. And yet, mysteriously, here we are singing about it. God help us. And we only have the courage to sing about it, I dare say, because somehow or other we have begun to hear the good news of what kind of God our God is, and the good news of what our humanity might be. And in the light of that, just possibly, we're able to say, that is a way, a life, which I want to be possible for myself and for the world. So a Christian Christmas ought to be a very surprising time. A time when we look at our stale pictures and thoughts about God and about humanity and let them be refreshed by the newness of what comes into the world in Bethlehem. And as we sing and celebrate, the thing we ought most earnestly to pray for this and every Christmas is that we shan't lose the sense of surprise. The surprise that prevents us from thinking of God as a distant autocrat. The surprise that will prevent us from thinking of human beings as a sad lost cause, or else as an absolutely successful and self-sufficient enterprise. The God who overflows in love, the humanity which God has trusted to reveal the depth of divine life. That's not obvious, and the surprising nature of it needs to be reaffirmed again and again. The whole point of Advent, that lost cause apart from chocolate calendars, is to give us a little bit of space to remember what it might be like not to believe all that, so that Christmas comes surprisingly. And even if Advent is a bit of a lost cause in our culture, that's no excuse for Christians not to try and clear the space, clear that room in the straw, as it were, of the stable, to let themselves be amazed once again, and to come and adore.